What I have in front of me today is my custom 7 PRC made by Oregon Mountain Rifle Company. OMR is located in Montana and they're a custom rifle building company, which is what I have here today. This is the rifle that I used in 2023 to shoot both my mule deer and blacktail. So this is my first ever custom rifle, so I am by no means an expert when it comes to custom rifles. This is just what I used and people have been asking about it, so I'm just gonna walk you guys through it. So a little bit of background when it comes to rifles, there's essentially 6 main parts that you have to undergo when choosing a rifle, right? So you have, your first thing is your action, which is this thing right here. You have your barrel, you have your stock, and then you have your trigger, and then you have your trigger guard and your magazine. I think those are the 6 main components that go into choosing a custom rifle. Of course, I'm generalizing it, so there's a lot of nuances that go in with that, but for the most part, those are the 6 main things that you're gonna choose when it comes to choosing a custom rifle or the parts to go into your custom rifle. So this particular model right here is called the Lonerock TI, the Oregon Mountain Rifle Lonerock TI. And the rifle is named after the action. So the action right here, which is what we're gonna cover first, is the Lonerock TI action. That's where you get the name for the rifle, the Lonerock TI action. So you get the Lonerock TI rifle. And this is an Oregon Mountain Rifle design action. So it's not a Remington 700 or a Savage action. This is an OMR Lonerock TI action. I don't have any issues with it. It's just smooth. It's got your typical 90-degree bolt throw. And then on the bolt handle itself, it's actually got a removable knob. So what I have on here right now is actually one of the oversized bolt knobs. And they come with a slightly smaller version, but when I was shooting my rifle, I actually preferred having a bigger bolt knob because it's easier to rack a shell in and out. So I just stuck with a bigger bolt knob, but just know that when you do buy one of these Lonerock TI actions, you can choose to put on an oversized bolt knob like I have here, or you can choose to have your standard size bolt knob. So that's the first thing that we're gonna talk about. The action itself is the Lonerock TI action. The next thing that we're gonna talk about is the barrel. So this is an Oregon Mountain Rifle barrel. Oregon Mountain Rifle Company, they actually make their own barrels in-house, right? So they make their own blanks. And so this is an Oregon Mountain Rifle barrel. This is a 24-inch barrel. And for the twist rate for the barrel, this is a 1 1/8-inch twist. If you don't know what twist rate is basically how fast your bullet spins 1 full revolution in your barrel before it leaves your barrel, right? So for example, this barrel is a 1 1/8-inch twist, meaning that when you shoot the bullet, a bullet spins 1 full revolution in every 8 inches of barrel. So that's what 1 1/8 means. If you have a 1 10-inch twist, then that means that for every 10 inches of barrel length, your bullet is spinning 1 full revolution. So this is a 1 1/8 twist because I guess I should have covered that first. This is a 7 PRC. So the reason why we went with a 1 1/8 twist is because the 7 PRC is designed to shoot heavier bullets, like 175 grain bullets. Having a faster twist rate will help stabilize those longer bullets. So again, Oregon Mountain Rifle carbon barrel. This is a carbon barrel, not a steel barrel. And it's a 24-inch barrel. So a 24-inch barrel with a 1 1/8 twist, that means that my bullets are spinning exactly 3 revolutions before leaving the barrel, which is plenty to stabilize the 175 grain Hornady ELDX that I have been shooting out of this rifle. That's the barrel. For the top or the front of my muzzle, I actually have a muzzle brake. This is also a muzzle brake made by Oregon Mountain Rifle Company, and this is the Oregon Mountain Rifle titanium muzzle brake. This is a 3-port brake, and the thread is 9/16 by 28, I believe. So the action, the barrel, and the muzzle brake are all Oregon Mountain Rifle Company. For the stock, which is this red thing right here, this is an AG composite carbon fiber stock. This particular model is the Alpine Hunter stock. Typically, when you look at inexpensive rifles and you start getting to the more expensive rifles, you will notice the most noticeable thing about any rifle from like the sub $1,000 range to the multiple $1,000 range is the ergonomics of the grip stock right here. So this is like your Macmillan type stock where you have a much more vertical grip than your standard horizontal sporter grip. So that's the stock, and again, it's a custom stock. So Lee Freeman, he let me choose what color I wanted to paint the stock, so I went with red because red's my favorite color. So we've got like a red paint job over the just your general carbon fiber AG composite stock look. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the trigger guard, and the trigger guard actually kind of goes in plan or goes in hand with the magazine in it of itself. So for that part, we are using the Hawkins Precision Hunter DBM bottom metal with the magazine. And for the 7 PRC, this magazine, it can hold up to 3, but 3 is a really tight fit, so I never put 3 rounds in the magazine. I actually just go with 2. And so whenever I'm hunting, I always have 2 in the magazine, and I don't hunt with 1 in the chamber. So when I do chamber a round in, I have 1 in the magazine and then 1 in the chamber. And then that leads to my next point. I actually added this little thing right here. At the end of season, this right here is the short action precision 2-round holder, where you could put 2 extra rounds right here so that should I need more than 2 shots, I can just easily grab another round right here, rack it in, and follow up with a 3rd shot. So that right there is the magazine. And then the trigger itself is a Bixen Andy Dakota trigger. It's set right at 1.5 pounds, which it's a really light trigger compared to what you're gonna find on the store shelves. But the more you shoot and the more you get comfortable with guns, I would say that for most people, the more experience you get, the lighter and lighter you actually start preferring your triggers to be. So when I first started hunting, I had like 6-pound triggers on my bolt action rifles. And then the more I started getting into more extended precision shooting, you kind of learn that having a heavy trigger, it affects your accuracy downrange. So you start going to lighter and lighter triggers. So I went from 6 to 4 to 3.5 to 3 to 2. And then now we're here at 1.5. And this thing is just, it's been a shooter. So just a safety precaution there. A 1.5 pound trigger is not something I just recommend for everybody right out of the gate. You really have to be cautious about that stuff, because the lighter your trigger, the more dangerous your firearm can be. So you can trip in the woods, and if you have a round chambered and your gun is on fire, like that can be negligible discharge, which can be fatal. Always be cautious when it comes to trigger poundage. Don't just be like, oh, okay, well, he's shooting a 1.5 pound trigger, so I'm gonna shoot a 1.5 pound trigger. Always work your way down when it comes to trigger weight. We're gonna go to what we topped this rifle with. So on top of the receiver here, we have a Picatinny rail, pretty standard there. And then for the rings, we have the Hawkins ultralight 30mm rings, and these rings actually have an anti-cant bubble level built onto it so that you don't have to go and put an additional bubble level onto the scope. It just makes your job a little bit easier and saves you a little bit of money there. And then for the scope, I just have this rifle topped with the Vortex Razor LHT 4.5 to 22 by 50 rifle scope. And the reason why I went with this scope is because I just like the scope. I like the features of it. It's relatively lightweight for what it's offering you. It's a 4.5 to 22 zoom range. So the lowest magnification is 4.5 and the highest magnification is 22. And then it's got a 50mm objective here. This scope right here is kind of my go-to configuration when it comes to choosing a do-it-all scope. 22X, you can zoom pretty much to any distance that I'm willing to shoot, which is 500 yards and less. 4.5 times minimum zoom still allows me to do the up close and personal shots like sub 50 yards without being too zoomed in and not being able to find the target in my scope. And then this scope does come with a 0-stop exposed elevation turret. If I want to adjust, I simply pop the scope up, dial up, and then pop it back down to have it stuck to that elevation adjustment. And then on this scope, I do have the Kestrel Glassing Systems throw lever on here on the magnification ring. This magnification ring on this scope is a little bit tougher than what I normally like on a scope. So having a throw lever like this, it just helps with the ease to zoom in and out of your scope. And the reason why I like the Kestrel Glassing Systems throw lever is because this throw lever is not a skinny stick where it can be kind of hard to use, especially if you're wearing gloves. This thing's got a much wider surface area for you to be pushing and pulling from, and so it makes your job of using a throw lever that much easier. And when I shot my blacktail, my mule deer, like having this throw lever, like sometimes I even forgot that I was zooming in and out of my scope to get back on the target or back on the deer, because it was just that much easier than not having the throw lever. To top out the scope, I have the AAD land or the Adland scope caps because I could not find, or Butler Creek does not make the correct sizes to fit the scope. So I went with the AAD land, and they're really high quality mounts. The one thing I really like about them is they actually are designed specifically to fit certain scopes. So these scope caps right here are designed specifically to fit the LHT with a 50mm objective. And they fit on like a glove, and then there's a little screw on the side where you can screw it and it'll tighten the scope cap onto the scope itself, so you don't have to worry about these scope caps popping off when you're hiking around in the woods. So that's the scope in and of itself. The last thing that I will touch on is the bipod. Bipods are a piece of gear where I kind of like to dip my toes and just kind of play around with different bipods. But the bipod that I've used for the past 2 seasons is the Atlas V8 BT10 bipod. This bipod has just been good. It's relatively heavy. I think it's like 12 ounces or so. So it's not the lightest weight bipod on the market, but the features that it has and the durability of it and just what you get with the overall package of the Atlas, it's a good bipod. Like, I really have nothing to complain about it. The only reason why I would ever upgrade from this bipod is to get a lighter bipod to shrink the overall weight of my rifle package. So again, that's my Oregon Mountain Rifle Lonerock TI. This rifle right here is chambered in 7 PRC. And again, I used it in 2023, shot my mule deer at 425 yards, 1 shot kill, dropped him on his spot. My blacktail I shot in Oregon, perfect shot. He did not drop, but he ran 80 yards, tipped over dead. And then Jason, who I was hunting with, he actually used this rifle to shoot another blacktail buck at 406 yards about, and pretty much 1 shot killed that buck as well. So that right there is my Oregon Mountain Rifle Lonerock TI. This is my first ever custom rifle. So again, just to reiterate, I'm not an expert when it comes to custom rifles, but this is just what I have. So I hope that helps you guys out. That's basically what it is. And the thing about Oregon Mountain Rifle Company is they do upgrades. So if you have a Tikka rifle or a Remington 700 rifle, like a stock standard off-the-shelf rifle, and you want to upgrade your rifle, go check out Oregon Mountain Rifle Company, because they can completely upgrade the rifle that you already have right now. So I know they do a lot of Tikka upgrades and they do a lot of Remington upgrades. They're coming out of the ballpark swinging, because right now they're making their own barrels, they're making their own actions, and from what Lee has told me, they're making their own stocks. So Oregon Mountain Rifle, they're going big, and I just want to give a huge shout out to Lee Freeman over at OMR for sending me this rifle. So full disclosure, I did not buy this rifle. Lee Freeman, he just watched the channel, my YouTube channel. He just really appreciated what I did, and he just wanted to support the channel, and he offered to send me a rifle, and that's what we got here. So I did not set up this rifle, so if you have any questions as to how Oregon Mountain Rifle sets up the rifle, you can give them a call. I just sent Lee the scope, and then from there he took everything into his own hands and he set up the rifle for me. He sighted my rifle in for me, did all the dope chart, making sure that my rifle was shooting good, and then shipped it back out my way. And then I re-zeroed it, went out and confirmed the dope, and then I took it out hunting, shot the biggest blacktail and biggest mule deer of my life so far. So that's my OMR Lonerock TI. So again, if you have any questions, leave a comment, or if you have questions, I would advise you to go reach out to Lee Freeman over at OMR. So with that being said, that's my first custom rifle, OMR Lonerock TI chambered to 7 PRC.